City of Cleveland Heights. They had that massive blaze that took 16 different cities to help put out. This was at the apartment complex, and really it was more than that. It was residential, it was commercial, called the Cedar Lee Meadowbrook Project. It was a massive $66 million project, caught fire. It's been under construction for about a year and a half, almost 2 years. Let's take you live now to Cleveland Heights for an update.
Shaker Heights, University Heights, Beechwood, the City of Cleveland, South Euclid, Warrensville Heights, Maple Heights, Lyndhurst, Richmond Heights, Highland Heights, Euclid, Mayfield Heights, Mayfield Village, Willoughby Hills, Orange Village, and Pepper Pike for coming to our aid during what was an immense fire in a massive development in our city. That kind of mutual aid, I think, needs to be lauded. The effort that those cities and their fire service brought to the city of Cleveland Heights was tremendous, and we appreciate that here in the city. Both, I speak for residents and staff alike, that we have a great deal of gratitude to the help that was provided. I'd also like to thank a couple other agencies and organizations that provided support, including Cuyahoga County Emergency Management, the Cuyahoga County Fire Chiefs Association, providing the Cuyahoga County Fire Mobile Command Vehicle, the American Red Cross, who came when called, the Hillcrest Heights Regional Fire Investigation Unit. And I'd like to take a moment as well, specifically to call out a couple people who provided support. So Lyndhurst Fire Chief Carroll, who brought over the Fire Mobile Command Vehicle with assistance and managed that process in support of this effort. I'd like to thank Battalion Chief Keene, Pat Keene, as well, specifically. He was the incident commander during this process and spent almost the entire time working hard to manage what was an extremely complicated firefighting effort, and kept people safe and effectively managed that firefighting effort in a way that resulted in no reported injuries and no spread of this fire from the initial building where the fire was located. So I want to thank VC Keene for his work on this process as well. We're going to talk about a few things in this conference. One is the firefighting effort itself, that process and how that went. We are going to have a brief discussion about the investigation process and the progress that we've made thus far, and the process moving forward. And then I'd like to give a little bit of time to talk about the rebuilding that we are going to be engaging in moving forward once we get through the initial process of investigating and working through how this occurred in the first place. Right now, I would like to ask all of you, we've got a couple different speakers here, and I'd like for questions to be held off until we get through the comments that each of them will be making to you today, and we'll open up questions toward the end of this process. For now, I would like to introduce Chief Jim Harry, Fire Chief Jim Harry, to provide our initial progress and the process of fighting this fire. Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, folks. I'm Chief Jim Harry from the Cleveland Heights Fire Department. I have a brief statement. At approximately 7:05 p.m. on Friday, January 24th, our fire crews responded to a building under construction near Cedar and Lee Roads. The crews encountered a heavy body of fire that had already entered the roof and ceiling spaces. The crews faced an extremely complex fire problem, made even more difficult by the freezing temperatures. The fire burned heavily from our arrival on scene until well into the next day. Crews did have to stay on scene to extinguish hot spots into the next night. Through very hard work by our people, along with assistance from many mutual aid companies, the fire was thankfully contained to a single building on the complex. Thankfully, there were no safety or assisting agency personnel seriously injured. The scene is still an active emergency scene, and the cause of the fire is under investigation. Our fire investigation unit is working alongside of the Ohio Fire Marshal's Office on this issue. The logistics involved in bringing this fire under control were massive, but every single person who was called on met the challenge. Our community is very resilient, and we will recover from this incident. Thank you for your attention. I'll turn it over to our lead fire investigator, Thomas Beers.
Good afternoon. Do you need to adjust your cameras?
Just spell your name, please.
I was just going to, it's Thomas, Thomas. Last name is Beers, Beers, just like a six-pack on the weekend. I've been assigned as the primary investigator on this fire. However, behind me is a contingent of highly skilled, educated, trained professionals, both from the Fire Investigation Unit, which is a task force comprised of investigators from the fire department as well as the police department. Additionally, we've called on resources from the Hillcrest Heights Regional Fire Investigation Unit. And as of yesterday, we've brought in our team members and partners from the State Fire Marshal's Office as well as the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. As far as the investigation process right now, as you can imagine, being an extremely large building. However, regardless of the size of the building itself, we just had this discussion whether it's a garage that catches on fire or a residential structure in any community here in the United States or specifically in our community. We tackle that from the same approach. We use a scientific, forensic-minded approach to the fire itself. The size of the building is merely distraction. As long as we follow the scientific methodology that has been assigned to us using the standards that all of our investigators, both on the fire and law enforcement side, work with. We will continue to seek answers not just for those that have a financial or work-related interest in the property, but also to bring some reassurance to the citizens themselves that the community will remain safe. Just to give you a background on how we do fire investigations in general, we never come into it with the idea that it is intentionally set or accidental. We come in very blindly and allow the facts of the case speak for themselves. Again, using laws of thermodynamics, heat transfers, very scientific, boring, forensically principled concepts. We take all of the evidence into its totality, and then that includes collecting data such as interviews, eyewitness reports, tips from the citizens, things they may have noticed or smelled prior to the fire, as well as taking documentation during the fire process. We were fortunate enough to have our investigators on scene relatively quickly. And again, not unheard of, our investigators were present during the fire suppression operations that Chief Harry just mentioned. And that's, at that moment, we're really beginning our data collection processes. But from there, we make a determination as to which way the investigation will lean, on a civil side or a criminal side. But it really is the totality of that evidence as it presents to us that we will find by either act or omission, intentional or unintentional, how the fire started and progressed through the building. As far as a timeline on those events, each fire itself is uniquely different from one another. Obviously, I mentioned earlier that is a large-sized building, as Chief Harry and Mayor Sarin both mentioned. We are playing against elements such as cold, wind, ice, water, and just a general cold. The investigation is progressing in a very timely and efficient manner so that we can get some answers for everyone from the community. So Please bear with us as we continue our investigation. We'll be working very closely with Chief Harry and Mayor Sarin, as well as the city's communications department, to make sure that any answers that you need or require in the next couple days or weeks, that we provide those to you in a very timely manner. So thank you very much.
So before I bring up our chief building official, Eric Elmy, I would like to mention very briefly that there were a couple people that I didn't thank and a couple organizations that I didn't thank. And I did want to extend my gratitude as well to Cleveland Heights Police, who were on scene and assisted throughout the entire firefight, and provided a great deal of assistance in making sure that the scene was secured, that we had resources coming to the scene in a way that was useful to the firefighters. And I also wanted to call out our Department of Public Works and Director Klingscale, and our Department of Parks and Recreation and Director Andres Gonzalez for providing additional support as well. The firefighters worked almost 20 hours in freezing cold, handling these water lines, and in those conditions, it can be extremely difficult to maintain stability. And one of the things that we were able to do with assistance from Department of Public Works and Parks and Recreation was make sure that we had sufficient salt to keep those firefighters stable in the fight against this fire. And so I wanted to express my thanks as well to departments that came to our aid in that way too. So with no further ado, I'd like to bring our Chief Building Official, Eric Elmy, up to the lectern to discuss some of the building standards and some of the process related to building permitting and inspection that relate to this particular incident.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Eric Elmy. I'm the Chief Building Official. And in this situation, unfortunately, the building department has to issue a demolition order. The building, we were working on it, that was 75% almost done, and it sadly got burned. As we speak, we are doing our investigation to find out what happened. As soon as we find more information, we will notify you. You are more than welcome to communicate with us. And it is very sad. That's what I can say. Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to touch on rebuilding for a second. As you've heard, we have to go through a process. We need to investigate what caused this fire. We have to, in order to do that, we have to ensure that the site is safe enough for the investigation to continue. That may take a little bit of time as we bring in a structural engineer to ensure that we can go into the property. This is compounded by the fact that this is encased in ice at this point. We are in the dead of winter, and we've just unloaded millions of gallons of water into this structure. And so that presents a bit of a complication, but we are working through that, and we will ensure that the people investigating this fire are doing so in a safe, effective, but also efficient manner. As that investigation takes place, we will also allow the opportunity for all of the other interested parties to investigate as well. And we hope to have this done as quickly as possible. We don't have a definite timeline for you just yet, but as we progress, we will provide more information as it becomes a bit more cemented. Once that investigation has proceeded, we hope to very quickly move to demolish this property so that we can begin the rebuilding. And again, we don't have a specific timeline for you on that because so much of it is dependent on the investigation proceeding. However, I can state with absolute certainty that the City of Cleveland Heights is dedicated to rebuilding and dedicated to no unnecessary delay in the progress of that rebuild. And I can assure you, I've spoken with Darren Kintner at Flaherty and Collins, and they are fully on board as partners with the city in the completion of this phase of the Cedar Lee Meadowbrook, or the Marquee project. We don't anticipate delaying the rebuild. We anticipate working through this investigation as quickly as possible with an eye toward completion in a comprehensive and effective way, but with efficiency as a goal as well in terms of how much time this takes, and then proceeding immediately to demolish this property and begin the rebuilding effort as quickly as possible. Flaherty and Collins, as our partner on this, is fully on board in moving forward, and we will see this project complete. I think I can open it up now for any questions that you may have. Make sure you let us know which of us you would prefer to address the question so that we can have somebody on board. We'll go this way, so you first, then you, then you.
This might either be for you or the building commissioner. Since this was an open construction site ongoing, were the construction gates shut or open at the time? Were there people there from the construction? And should there have been somebody, or was there somebody watching the site as security?
So I can speak based on the time that we estimate that this fire started. I don't believe that there were, okay, I'll turn it over to Investigator Thomas Beers to give you a complete answer instead of just riffing.
So if I heard your question correctly, it was, were there people on scene, whether workers, and what else? If you could rephrase it.
Were the gates supposed to be closed and locked at the time? Were there any evidence of them being open, and was somebody supposed to be watching?
So there is, those are all things that I mentioned, like the totality of evidence that we're looking at. Whether they were open or closed, we do know that there is internal security video footage from the area that would indicate or not indicate, or give us some idea of if someone was there. There are gates, obviously, around that construction property or that site, but digging through the statements from the various workers on scene, I mean, you have to understand with something like this, you have electricians, HVAC, all of your normal utilities, not to mention people that specialize in various components of the construction, flooring, ceilings, whatever, lighting, kitchens. So all of those individuals have to be interviewed. Then our investigative team collaborates with each other at night to go over those notes. So to re-answer your question, I don't have a definitive answer as to whether gates or security questions or being insecure at that time, what the status was. But that is one of the things that we obviously look at. Does that answer your question? Okay.
How much is the estimated rebuild cost, and where is that money going to come from?
All right, that's a great question, and that's going to be another one of those questions that we're going to have to sort out. In a general way, we can speak to the fact of insurance, allowing for some of the mitigation of the cost of rebuild. But that's a conversation that the city will have to have with Flaherty and Collins about what moves forward and how in terms of the funding. Our anticipation is that given Flaherty and Collins' dedication to completion on this project, this will not be a difficult conversation to have. It just may take some time to sort out exactly how that works. And this, may be a conversation that we have to have ongoing because of different contractors having different levels of insurance and sorting out what the investigation, what the evidence points to in terms of the cause of this may have an impact on how any rebuild gets paid for. And so we can't answer that question, but it's a complicated question to answer, and part of that answer will come from the investigation, what the evidence points to in terms of the cause of the fire. The total project was approximately a $66 million investment. Obviously, this portion of the project was not the complete project. It was a relatively large section of the project, so we anticipate that the cost will be relatively expensive, but we don't believe that it's out of reach to move forward and correct this this issue and get over this hurdle toward completion of the full project.
I know that right now an investigation has to be completed before you can definitively answer this, but are there any primary indicators to determine if this was intentionally set, how the fire started, where it started, if accelerant was used, anything like that?
I'll give it back to Investigator Beers for any information that might be used.
At this time, we're not disclosing which way that we are leaning towards. Again, I think I talked a little bit about using a scientific methodology. By automatically thinking about intentional or unintentional just creates a confirmation bias. You know, we may end up looking at evidence a little bit differently. So we have to come in and look at it with just each individual piece as a data set, and then weigh those against other pieces of data set or other pieces of data. So we are not looking at it as, I'm not going to comment as to whether or not we are or are not looking at it as intentionally set or accidental either way. And just not going to do that.
Just as an additional piece there, I do want to reassure everybody that we're not going to leave this press conference and go silent on you. As this progresses, we will be providing more information about our progress on the investigation, our progress on sort of costing out and moving forward with a rebuild and making sure that this project sees completion. We will not, go into our bunkers and not provide information as it comes up. We are interested in making sure that the public is fully informed about this progress as soon as we have information that we can provide. But I do want to reiterate the importance of coming to this with no biases, coming to this with no expectation of a particular result. That's how we tend to deal with investigations generally, and in this case, we've got some specific scientific ways to take the evidence into account as a holistic picture.
Dan DeRose with 19 News. As we've been listening to the news conference out of Cleveland Heights from that just incredible blaze that happened Friday night at the $66 million Cedar Lee Meadowbrook project. It was both residential and mixed use. You heard the mayor say that they are committed to a rebuild. They do not want to delay the rebuild in any way. It's just going to take some time because now they have to demolish it. As you heard, it's encased in ice right now. The investigators will not tell us and the public yet which way they're leaning, whether this was intentional, an accident, deliberate. They won't give us any of that at this point because they need to get in there and fully investigate. They did make a mention of perhaps some cameras to show if anybody was in and around that site, seeing as how this started around 3:30 in the afternoon to see maybe who was there. This started in the evening to see if anybody was at that construction site at the time. We'll have an update on this, a live report from our Harry Boomer when we continue our 3.5 hours of news and first alert weather on Channel 19, which is on right now. Until then, I'm Dan DeRose with 19 News. Have a good afternoon.